لهم ولكافة الهيئات العاملين في اللجنة عن تهانينا الحارة على العمل الجبار الذي يقومون به للنهوض بحقوق الإنسان والشعوب على مستوى قارتنا. كما يسعدني أن أتوجه بخالص الشكر وعظيم الامتنان لسلطات جمهورية غامبيا الشقيقة على احتضان أعمال الدورة الحالية وعلى حسن الاستقبال وكرم الضيافة الذين حظيت بهما أنا والوفد المرافق لي منذ قدومنا إلى أرض جمهورية غامبيا. وأود أن أعرب كذلك عن ارتياحنا التام لمستوى التعاون المتميز بين حكومة بلادي واللجنة الإفريقية لحقوق الإنسان والشعوب وآلياتها الخاصة، ولعل خير دليل على تميز هذا التعاون استضافة بلادي لأعمال الدورة العادية الأخيرة للجنة، إضافة إلى المؤتمرات والمنتديات المحضرة لها. السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، لا تزال قارتنا تواجه عدة تحديات على مستويات مختلفة، أهمها الإرهاب والتطرف والجريمة المنظمة والفقر المدقع والنزاعات المسلحة والهجرة وتدهور البيئة، وما يترتب على ذلك من تقصير في استيفاء الالتزامات المتعلقة بحقوق الإنسان، الأمر الذي أثر على مستوى النمو والاستقرار في مختلف بلدان قارتنا. ومن أجل المساهمة في رفع هذه التحديات ووعي منه بالصلة الوثيقة بين ثلاثية الأمن والتنمية وحقوق الإنسان، قام فخامة رئيس الجمهورية السيد محمد العبد العزيز بأدوار طلائعية في الدفاع عن حقوق الإنسان في المحافل الإفريقية والدولية، كما أولى سيادته عناية خاصة لإحلال السلم والأمن في كافة أرجاء القارة ومحاربة الإرهاب والتطرف في إطار مجموعة دول الساحل الخمسة. كما أن احتضان نواكشوط القمة الأخيرة للاتحاد الإفريقي يكرس هذا التوجه. السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، عرفت حالة حقوق الإنسان في بلاد نقلة نوعية خلال السنوات الأخيرة عكست الإنجازات الهامة والمتنوعة التي حققناها على مستوى تعزيز وحماية الحقوق المدنية والسياسية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية والثقافية، وفي مجال الوقاية من التعذيب وحقوق المرأة والطفل والأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة والتحسين من ظروف الاعتقال داخل أماكن الاحتجاز. كما قمنا بجهود معتبرة في سبيل محاربة آثار الرق والعنف ضد المرأة وغيرهما من الظواهر المعيقة لتمتع الإنسان بحقوقه الكاملة. وفي هذا الإطار انضمت بلادي إلى كافة الاتفاقيات والمعاهدات الدولية والإقليمية الرئيسة في مجال حقوق الإنسان وأهم بروتوكولاتها الاختيارية. وترتبط بلادي بعلاقات وثيقة بلجان الإشراف على تطبيق هذه الصكوك والمعاهدات من خلال التعاطي الإيجابي مع مختلف اللجان الأممية والإفريقية والعربية المنشئة بموجب هذه الاتفاقيات، وذلك عبر تقديم التقارير الدورية أمامها. كما تتعاطى بلادي بصفة إيجابية مع المقررين الخاصين للهيئات الدولية، الأمر الذي عكسته زيارات بعضهم لموريتانيا. السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، وعلى المستوى المؤسسي تتوفر موريتانيا على عدة أجهزة وطنية تعمل بالتعاون مع منظمات المجتمع المدني والهيئات الدولية من أجل النهوض بحقوق الإنسان، وتضم هذه المؤسسات فضلا عن مفوضية حقوق الإنسان والمحاكم الهيئات المستقلة لحقوق الإنسان المنشأة وفقا للمعايير الدولية. وعلى مستوى الحكامة الديمقراطية شهدت بلادي هذه السنة تنظيم انتخابات بلدية وجهوية وتشريعية شفافة بمشاركة جميع مكونات الطيف السياسي من أقلبية ومعارضة بجو من السلم والتنافس الإيجابي. وقد نظمت هذه الاستحقاقات من طرف لجنة وطنية مستقلة للانتخابات وبحضور مراقبين دوليين من ضمنهم مراقبون من الاتحاد الإفريقي، حيث تم لأول مرة وباقتراع مباشر انتخاب مجالس جهوية بقية تعزيز اللامركزية والتنمية المحلية تجسيدا للإصلاحات الدستورية الأخيرة. السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، إن موضوع الحكامة الرشيدة ومحاربة الفساد الذي تم اختياره شعارا لدورتنا الحالية يمثل أهم مرتكزات برنامج حكومة بلادي التي صادقت على اتفاقيتي الأمم المتحدة والاتحاد الإفريقي لمحاربة الفساد، واتخذت عدة إجراءات خلال السنوات الأخيرة تهدف إلى ضمان تسيير شفاف ومعقل للموارد العمومية. نذكر منها وضع وتنفيذ الاستراتيجية الوطنية لمحاربة الفساد وخطط العمل القطاعية لمحاربة هذه الظاهرة، حيث تحرص القطاعات الحكومية على تطبيق هذه السياسات والاستراتيجيات بالتعاون مع المجتمع المدني، والمصادقة كذلك على القوانين ذات الصلة وتطبيقها. مكنت هذه الإجراءات من إحراز نتائج معتبرة في هذا المجال، وتتوفر بلادي على عدة هيئات دستورية وإدارية مكلفة بمحاربة الفساد. كما يلعب المجتمع المدني دورا هاما في مكافحة الفساد، إذ توجد عدة منظمات وهيئات إعلامية تعمل في هذا المجال من خلال مرصدين وشبكتين صحفيتين لتكريس الشفافية والوقاية من الفساد. وتعمل الحكومة على تعزيز قدرات هذه المنظمات والهيئات للرفع من مهنيتها. السيدة الرئيسة، السيدات والسادة، إن حكومة الجمهورية الإسلامية الموريتانية تؤكد تمسكها بالتزاماتها الإفريقية في مجال حقوق الإنسان، وباستعدادها التام للتعاطي الإيجابي والفعال مع جميع آليات لجنتنا الموقرة. وفي الأخير أتمنى لأعمال دورتنا التوفيق والنجاح. أشكركم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Et remercier également le gouvernement de la Mauritanie pour l'hospitalité qu'il nous avait offerte à l'occasion de la tenue de la 62e session ordinaire en Mauritanie. Nous avons pris bonne note de tous ces développements que vous venez de dérouler dans différents domaines, notamment dans celui de la lutte contre la corruption, qui est le thème de l'année. Nous comptons sur vous, sur votre engagement pour la mise en œuvre des recommandations que la Commission africaine a formulées à l'endroit de la Mauritanie à la suite de la présentation de ces rapports périodiques combinés. Nous allons, au cours de cette session d'ailleurs, adopter les observations conclusives, d'autres observations conclusives, et nous espérons évidemment que votre département mettra un point d'honneur à les mettre en œuvre et que vous allez continuer, comme par le passé, à entretenir des relations de proximité avec la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Merci encore, Monsieur le ministre. La parole est à la Côte d'Ivoire. Son Excellence, Madame Aimée Zébéyou, secrétaire d'État aux droits de l'homme.
Excellente Madame la Présidente de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, honorables membres de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, Mesdames et Messieurs, le gouvernement de la République de Côte d'Ivoire accorde une place prépondérante au respect de la dignité humaine dans sa politique de développement, conformément à la foi du peuple ivoirien dans les droits fondamentaux de la personne humaine tels que proclamés dans sa Constitution et dans les instruments internationaux de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme auxquels le pays a souverainement souscrit. Résolu à coopérer avec l'ensemble des mécanismes de surveillance des instruments de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme dont elle est signataire, la République de Côte d'Ivoire s'honore de participer aux travaux de la 63e session ordinaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples et renouvelle ses compliments à Madame la Présidente de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples et son équipe pour les efforts inlassables de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme sur notre cher continent. Les sessions de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples servent en effet de forum de dialogue constructif lui permettant d'identifier et de faire face aux défis qui s'opposent à la réalisation des objectifs de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. C'est pourquoi la République de Côte d'Ivoire est heureuse et fière de son assiduité aux différentes sessions de la Commission africaine qui témoignent de façon éloquente de son entière confiance en notre mécanisme régional de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme, d'une part, et d'autre part, de la volonté sans cesse renouvelée des autorités ivoiriennes de mettre en œuvre effectivement les dispositions de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, ainsi que celles des autres instruments internationaux de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme sur le territoire ivoirien. La pertinence des différentes thématiques inscrites à l'ordre du jour de la 63e session ordinaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples illustre, une fois de plus, le ferme engagement de notre précieux mécanisme à œuvrer pour la pleine jouissance de nos populations des droits inaliénables et inhérents à l'être humain. Saisissant l'opportunité que m'offre la tribune de la présente session, je voudrais réitérer la gratitude du gouvernement ivoirien à l'ensemble de la communauté internationale et plus particulièrement à la Commission africaine pour son soutien par le biais du rapporteur spécial en charge de la Côte d'Ivoire pour le suivi de la situation des droits de l'homme dans mon pays. Qu'il me soit également permis de remercier vivement le gouvernement de la République de Gambie pour l'accueil fraternel qui nous a été réservé. Consciente du profond attachement du peuple ivoirien au respect des droits de l'homme, les autorités ivoiriennes ont inscrit la poursuite des idéaux de l'État de Côte d'Ivoire, de l'État de droit, au cœur du plan national de développement. Ainsi, les cadres normatifs et institutionnels de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme s'améliorent progressivement. Du point de vue normatif, la Côte d'Ivoire poursuit inlassablement ses efforts visant à rendre sa législation conforme aux instruments dont elle est signataire. Elle a en effet entrepris une réforme de ses codes usuels, notamment le code pénal et le code de procédure pénale, à l'effet d'une meilleure incrimination des violations et atteintes aux droits de l'homme tels que le viol, la torture, les traitements cruels, inhumains et dégradants, les actes de terrorisme, la discrimination raciale, les violences basées sur le genre et toutes les formes de discrimination à l'égard des femmes. Au niveau institutionnel, l'on note l'opérationnalité de la Commission d'accès à l'information d'intérêt public et aux documents publics, KIDP, la création de l'Agence nationale de presse en remplacement du Conseil national de la presse, la création depuis le 11 juillet 2018 d'un secrétariat d'État chargé des droits de l'homme que j'ai l'honneur de diriger. Il est à noter également que le processus d'adoption de la loi de refonte de la Commission nationale des droits de l'homme de Côte d'Ivoire pour lui conférer le statut A au regard des principes de Paris est en cours. En outre, engagé à coopérer pleinement avec les mécanismes de surveillance des instruments dont la Côte d'Ivoire est signataire, notamment par la soumission régulière des rapports, le gouvernement ivoirien a procédé à la création d'un comité interministériel de suivi de l'application des instruments internationaux relatifs aux droits de l'homme. Par ailleurs, se montrant attentif et réceptif aux aspirations de la communauté nationale et aux observations de la communauté internationale, dont la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme, qui invitait les autorités ivoiriennes à poser des actes forts pour la réconciliation nationale, le président de la République de Côte d'Ivoire a pris le 6 août 2018 une ordonnance d'amnistie en faveur de plusieurs centaines de prévenus. Consciente de ce que les notions de droits de l'homme et de développement sont indissociables et que le respect des droits de l'homme est indispensable pour la stabilité et la paix sociale, la Côte d'Ivoire poursuit ses efforts de réalisation des infrastructures sociales, économiques, éducatives, sanitaires et culturelles pour une jouissance effective des droits de l'homme sur l'ensemble du territoire ivoirien. En témoigne la construction ou la réhabilitation d'infrastructures sociales et sanitaires, l'extension, la construction ou la réhabilitation d'infrastructures scolaires et sanitaires, l'extension des réseaux hydrauliques et électriques, les mesures visant à lutter contre la cherté de la vie. La Côte d'Ivoire se réjouit de l'organisation des élections municipales et régionales du 13 octobre 2018 qui ont été dans l'ensemble libres, transparentes et apaisées sur l'ensemble du territoire national. Il est vrai, quelques incidents que le gouvernement ivoirien regrette ont émaillé ces élections sans impacter véritablement le processus. Au terme de mon propos, je voudrais exprimer les félicitations et les encouragements de mon pays aux dirigeants de notre illustre institution. Je vous remercie.
Madam Chairperson, Commissioners, and all distinguished delegates, the government and indeed the people of Malawi are pleased to be part of the 63rd session on human and people's rights here in Banjul, the Republic of the Gambia. At the outset, we'd like to wish the people of Gambia well as the country continues to make significant steps in her democratic journey. Our delegation comprises officers from the following institutions: the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Office of the President and Cabinet, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Minister of Gender, Children, Disability and Social Welfare, Malawi Police Service, Malawi Human Rights Commission, the Legal Aid Bureau, the Malawi Law Commission, as well as the following civil society organizations: Center for Human Rights and Rehabilitation, Center for Human Rights Education and Assistance, Center for the Development of the People, Paralegal Advisory Institute, and Mango Key Population NGO Network. As Malawi, we remain committed to human rights at home and abroad. We believe that the state is the primary human rights defender. And in that regard, we always strive that the ideals of a free, open, and democratic society entrenched in our progressive constitution are realized through a robust legislative, institutional, and policy framework. On the continental level, we note the progress we as a people have made since our emancipation from colonialism. The vision and dreams of Nkrumah, Nyerere, Kamuzu Banda, Haile Selassie, and Mandela, as well as others, of a free and progressive Africa are well alive and articulated in Agenda 2063. It is Malawi's commitment to ensure that she plays a vital and constructive role in the realization of the aspirations of Agenda 2063. Turning to this session, we note the loaded agenda that we have before us. Our periodic state party report is being finalized as we speak and will be submitted very shortly. We would like to wish well those countries that will be reviewed at this session, and these are Angola, Botswana, and Togo. We also note the continued growth of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. It's been a long journey. While many challenges persist, we can say Ebenezer, which means that this far the Lord has been with us. We have noted the progressive thematic guidelines, principles, model laws, etc. that the Commission has developed over the years. Malawi has been a big beneficiary of such initiatives. We can point to many of our laws that have drawn inspiration from both the Charter and the Maputo Protocol. We can also point to many initiatives at domestic level that have benefited from guidelines from the Commission, and these include the Rwanda guidelines as well as the Robben Island guidelines. We would like to suggest, however, that the Commission should simplify state party reporting guidelines. It is our view that we now have too many thematic state party reporting guidelines, which are making the state party reporting process a bit cumbersome. And the amount of information being demanded by each guideline is quite huge. A more simplified format would therefore be more user-friendly and effective. On the issue of the effectiveness and independence of the Commission, we should be guided by our own instruments. Our long history of struggle against oppression should always remind us at all times that there is no time to drop the guard. Ultimately, the Africa that our forefathers dreamt of and which successive generations have hoped for is an Africa that is free and embedded with the rule of law, good governance, and democratic values. Let us, therefore, choose to be on the right side of history. Looking forward in terms of Malawi, we are pleased that at this session, 4 of our civil society organizations will submit their applications for observer status. It is Malawi's commitment that civil society will continue to have space for constructive and progressive engagement with government. To drive that point home, we will, on the sidelines of this session, hold an event on state and civil society collaboration in the protection of human rights. This is to underscore the point that it is possible for government and civil society to work together, disagree at times, and move forward for the sake of our people. We are holding tripartite general elections in May 2019. And so far, all the preparations are proceeding well. And we believe that the people of Malawi will participate in credible, free, and fair elections next year. All key institutions, such as the Malawi Electoral Commission, the Malawi Human Rights Commission, and the Malawi Police Service, are expected to play their roles with independence and integrity. We owe it to our people that the electoral process should be credible. We'd like to acknowledge communication from the Commission on the possibility of Malawi hosting an ordinary session of the Commission in future. We appreciate this and will formally respond shortly. We are glad to be part of this session, and both government and civil society delegates will fully participate in the plenary discussions as well as side events. We wish all of us fruitful deliberations and reiterate our faith that the ideals of our forefathers are realistic and achievable in our lifetime. God bless Africa. Thank you very much.
Honorable Madame Soyaita Maiga, Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Commissioners, distinguished representatives of state parties, distinguished representatives of national human rights institutions and civil society organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the International Committee on Violence. Sexual violence remains tragically prevalent in many modern conflicts, including in the African continent, and its consequences are devastating and extensive for victims, their families, and often entire communities. Consequences range from physical injuries through psychological trauma, psychosocial disorder, to impact on the very fabric of families and the society as a whole. Sexual violence is absolutely and adequately prohibited under international law, and more precisely under international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Rape and other forms of sexual violence are prohibited in both international and non-international armed conflict. In certain circumstances, they can amount to a war crime, crime against humanity, or even genocide. During the last 20 years, international criminal law has considerably evolved and has criminalized the most serious forms of sexual violence at the international level. These three bodies of international law strongly complement and positively influence each other in this field. International law, as it is, provides sufficient and adequate rules. The implementation, however, of these rules at the national and international level needs to be strengthened to effectively reduce and ultimately eliminate the occurrence of sexual violence. In this respect, when considering the needs of women and girls during conflict, prevention should be at the core of any national legislation, aimed at protecting them in times of war but also of peace. It is essential that states resolutely engage in preventing sexual violence. The ICRC advocates for the criminalization of rape and other forms of sexual violence in national legislation and inclusion of the prohibition in the international internal regulations and manuals of armed forces and groups. In this respect, the ICRC acknowledges the importance of the Maputo Protocol on the Rights of Women in Africa, ascribes to full respect of IHL. Indeed, better respect for existing rules of IHL would ensure better protection of women and girls in armed conflict. The ICRC is committed to supporting the states in fulfilling their obligations, including through disseminating the provisions of IHL and lending technical expertise to support states in integrating the prohibition of sexual violence in armed conflict into their domestic legal frameworks. Madame la Présidente, Honorable Commissaire, Madame la rapporteure spéciale sur les prisons et les conditions de détention. Sur un autre sujet, le CICR reste encore préoccupé par le sort des détenus en Afrique. En 2017, les délégués du CICR ont effectué 1870 visites, dont 531 lieux de détention, hébergeant plus que 340 000 personnes en Afrique. Trop souvent, nous constatons que les autorités sont confrontées à une surpopulation carcérale qui contribue à la dégradation d'infrastructures parfois héritées de l'ère coloniale. L'accès à l'eau, la nourriture et aux soins de santé s'en trouvent limités. Si le CICR cherche avant tout à renforcer la capacité des autorités à surmonter ces défis, il intervient souvent directement pour faire face aux urgences les plus aiguës. Comme exemple, notre institution supplée les insuffisances de la chaîne alimentaire dans une quinzaine de pays du continent en faveur des détenus. Ce type d'intervention permet d'éviter les pires effets néfastes sur la vie des détenus. Néanmoins, nous sommes pleinement conscients.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Honorable Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great honor and privilege to address the 63rd session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights at this August gathering. Lesotho looks up to the sessions of the Commission with enthusiasm as we find them as a platform of reflecting on the meaning, significance, and indispensable need for human rights. We hold high esteem of the African Commission, which continues to stand with the millions of people around the African continent and the world, whose voices are denied and demand what should be guaranteed. Our human rights, universal, indivisible, inalienable for everyone, every day. Allow me, Madam Chairperson, to briefly make mention of Lesotho's political state of affairs. As a step towards the road to national peace and future stability in Lesotho, the National Leaders Forum was convened from 23rd to 24th August 2018. It was attended by representatives of the ruling coalition, opposition political parties, civil society organizations, religious organizations, traditional leaders, and leaders of Lesotho civil society. The two-day gathering ended with the signing of the Lesotho National Leaders Forum Declaration on Comprehensive Reforms. The signing of the declaration is a significant and critical step toward an inclusive, participatory, democratic, transparent, and comprehensive reforms process. All signatories pledged to fully and effectively implement the declaration and committed to convening the national dialogue without undue delay. The national dialogue is intended to debate and agree on a consensus basis on how to move forward with the reforms process in the Kingdom of Lesotho. Preparations are underway for the holding of the national dialogue. Turning now to the state of play and measures undertaken in promoting and protecting human rights in Lesotho. Madam Chairperson, in his capacity as the Food and Agricultural Organization Special Ambassador on Nutrition and also Nutrition Champion for the African Union, His Majesty King Letsie III hosted a high-level forum on early childhood nutrition forum in Southern Africa from 2 to 3 October 2018. The forum was to discuss on how stunting, which is a major challenge in most African countries, could be addressed as it affects the health and education of children, and that nutrition should be given the priority it deserves for proper development of children, particularly at the early childhood. Countries were urged to join efforts to ensure that they promote collaboration on issues of nutrition and pull in one direction towards achieving one goal of eliminating malnutrition, as well as achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. As part of action towards zero hunger, the government of Lesotho, in which stunting and malnutrition continues to be a problem, is in the process of preparing a roadmap for a comprehensive approach to promote early childhood nutrition. Lesotho is further working on the establishment of the Food and Nutrition Council, which is intended to coordinate all line ministries in promoting nutrition-related issues. Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, reporting is an important tool used to assess or monitor the country's progress in implementing the domestic implementation of human rights instruments, hence improving the human rights status of beneficiaries of such instruments. It is on this basis that the Center for Human Rights of the University of Pretoria in the Republic of South Africa provided financial and technical support to Lesotho for a compilation of the overdue reports on the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the Maputo Protocol. The report, which covers the 2nd to the 8th periodic reports, and the initial report of the Maputo Protocol has been duly submitted to the Commission. Lesotho looks forward to engaging in a dialogue with the Commission in the near future. In order to cooperate with the African Union system and its mechanisms, Lesotho hosted a promotion mission which was undertaken by Honorable Commissioner Sik Yun from 8 to 12 October 2018. The promotion mission posed an opportunity for Lesotho to take stock of her achievements, shortcomings, and the challenges that lie ahead in the promotion and protection of human rights of her citizens. We look forward, Madam Chairperson, to the report of the mission, and Lesotho remains committed to implementing the findings and recommendations to the best of her ability. Older persons represent one of the most valuable national treasures, and as a testimony to this, Lesotho signed and ratified the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of elder persons, it being the first country to do so. Lesotho undertakes to execute obligations under this protocol in good faith so that the rights of older people are promoted and protected. Madam Chairperson, Lesotho continues to be beset by challenges including a decline in agricultural production as a result of deteriorating rangeland conditions, soil erosion, periodic droughts, debilitating scourge of HIV and AIDS, and the global financial crisis. All these contribute to poverty and food insecurity. Despite these challenges, Lesotho shall continue to implement the principles contained in the African Charter as well as other pertinent regional and international treaties to the best of her capability. In conclusion, my delegation would therefore like to reiterate Lesotho's commitment to working in cooperation with the African Union Commission towards attaining a continent that is free of human rights violation, where the rule of law and democracy, as spelled out in the international human rights law, prevail. I thank you.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, Honorable Commissioners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The current human rights situation in Cameroon is characterized by security challenges in the far north region, specifically attacks orchestrated by the terrorist group Boko Haram. In the east region, by frequent attacks perpetrated on civilians by rebel groups from the Central African Republic. In the northwest and southwest regions, by the crisis that has resulted to an increase of internally displaced persons and mass displacements of refugees to neighboring villages in Nigeria. It is also characterized by the presidential elections of 7th October 2018. Considering continuous attacks observed in the far north region perpetrated on civilians by the Boko Haram terrorist group in previous years, calm has returned in this region thanks to continuous collaboration of the defense and security forces with the population. Consequently, internally displaced persons are gradually returning to most localities in the said region. Despite this registered progress, cases of atrocities perpetrated by armed persons in military uniforms on civilians have been observed and condemned by the Commission. Moreover, repressive measures have been adopted by the government to investigate and punish such acts. Furthermore, abductions for ransom and theft of cattle are major challenges observed in the Adamawa and North regions. Some of these issues are monitored by the regional branch offices of the National Commission on Human Rights and Freedoms. As concerns the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions, the National Commission on Human Rights and Freedoms has publicly expressed its worry on several occasions. Since the beginning of this crisis, on the increase of violence in these regions, characterized by the burning of public and private buildings, continuous abduction of administrative and traditional rulers by armed groups, murder of some elements of defense and security forces by these armed groups, the killing of civilians during armed confrontations, etc. While appreciating efforts adopted by the state to address the situation, the Commission has continuously condemned this violence and recommended inclusive dialogue as the only solution to the crisis that has greatly affected the right to life, security, fair trial, access to justice, health, education, freedom of movement of the population. As regards the 7th October presidential elections, the National Commission on Human Rights and Freedom closely monitored it in all the phases. It deployed 180 observers on the field for the monitoring of the electoral phase. It published a press statement through which it expressed its relative satisfaction in the whole process because of some observed incidents and irregularities. As usual, the Commission will produce a report on the presidential election. For the foregoing, the National Commission on Human Rights and Freedom recommends to the State of Cameroon to increase its financial resources in order to facilitate the effective promotion and protection of human rights in Cameroon, to accelerate the decentralization process and continue promoting unity among Cameroonians, to step up the program for human rights education at all levels, to finalize the ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture that institutes a national mechanism for the prevention against torture. The National Commission on Human Rights and Freedom assures the states international and regional human rights mechanisms of its collaboration on human rights-related issues. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excellencies, dear Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. The National Mechanism for Prevention of Torture in Mauritania, named NPM, was established on the 20th of April 2016 under the law number 34, dated 2015, and dated on the 10th of September 2015, in accordance with the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment ratified by Mauritania in 2012. The NPM comprises a president, 12 members selected from candidates from socio-professional organizations, and a secretary general. The president and the members of the NPM are appointed by decree of the President of the Republic for a term of 4 years, renewable once partially or totally. The President and the members of the NPM take an oath before the President of the Supreme Court before taking office. The Secretary General of the NPM is appointed by decree of the Ministerial Council. The mission of the NPM is to conduct organized, scheduled, or announced visits without notice to any place where there are or may be persons deprived of their freedom. The purpose is to inquire into their conditions of detention and to ensure that they have not been subject to torture or any other degrading or inhuman treatment or punishment in accordance with the internal rules and the procedures of the mechanism. The NPM receives complaints and allegations of torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment that happen in places of deprivation of liberty and forwards them to the administrative and judiciary authorities or other institutions competent to investigate. The NPM is working to raise awareness among stakeholders about the disadvantages of torture and other inhuman and degrading treatment, and to monitor the implementation of the recommendations of its reports. The mechanism also works to foster a constructive dialogue leading with the government, leading to the improvement of prisoners' conditions and the preservation of their rights. Because of the sensitivity of the mechanism mission, its members enjoy the immunities and benefits necessary for the exercise of their function. Breaching or assaulting a member of the NPM or hindering the performance of his mission or the mission of someone he requires is tantamount to assaulting or hindering a magistrate during the performance of his duties and is punishable in accordance with the laws in force. Thus, since its establishment in 2016, the National Mechanism for Prevention of Torture in Mauritania has been able to organize visits to all prisons in the country and the centers of detention and rehabilitation of children in conflict with the law, most police stations, and as well as the gendarmerie brigades all over the country in accordance with its preventive mandate to inquire about the conditions of detention of prisoners and detainees. Namely, we made visits to prisons and centers of detention and reintegration of children in conflict with the law to all 18 prisons all over the countries, to the centers in Nouakchott and Nouadhibou, and to most of the police stations and gendarmerie brigades all over the country. Following all these visits, and in accordance with its preventive mandate, the NP prepared reports including observations and recommendations concerning the conditions of detentions of prisons, such as overcrowding, record keeping, food, healthcare, sport, prison infrastructures, addressed to the competent administrative and judiciary conditions, and we noticed that very important improvements have been taken place. On the other hand, the NPM has attended this year the sessions of the Committee Against Torture and the Committee for the Right of the Child in Geneva of the United Nations, and addressed alternative reports to those United Nations body. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you, Your Excellence. Your Excellence, Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Your Excellence, dear Commissioners, members of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Your Excellence, representatives of the African Union, Your Excellence, representative of the government of Gambia, Your Excellence, diplomats accredited to Gambia, state delegates and participants, invited guests, dear colleague, we thank you for the privilege and honor to be given this exceptional opportunity to address you at this session on behalf of the NGO community and people of Tanzania. We extend our most sincere gratitude to the authorities and people of the Republic of the Gambia for their warm welcome and hospitality. Madam Chairperson, although we are proud and applaud our government's determination under His Excellency President John Pombe Magufuli in fighting grand corruption, embezzlement of government funds, improvement of public infrastructure and industrialization, but on the other hand, we are deeply concerned by the alarming human rights violations, especially civic and political rights, contrary to our constitution, ratified regional and international instruments. Over the past 2 years, the freedoms of assembly, expression, association, and the right to take part in governance have severely been restricted by the government apparatus. There has been continued restrictions to political assembly. Political parties' freedom to exercise their activities has been curtailed. Public political meetings and rallies have been suspended by the presidential fiat, and restricted to politicians' own constituencies, despite of absence of the law that provide for such constraints. More than 53 members and leaders of the opposition political parties have been arrested, prosecuted, and others sentenced to jail for allegedly organizing unlawful assemblies. There have been continuous threats from the government to deregister some of the vibrant critical civil societies, such as Tanganyika Law Society, which is the Tanzania Mainland Bar Association, and other CSOs for what is called elements of political activism and non-compliance to the government, to the NGO law. The right to participate in governance has also been violated. Most of the 2017 and 2018 by-elections were marred by violence and irregularities and incidences of massive human rights violations, including excessive use of force by law enforcement agencies, abduction of party leaders, representatives, and voters, beatings and torture. There have been continued threats to CSOs and religious leaders for critically commenting on governance, and political issues. We therefore, respectively, call upon the Commission, first, to conduct an immediate assessment into cases of arbitrary restrictions on freedoms of assembly, expression, and association in Tanzania, in accordance with the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Again, to take initiative to influence the government of Tanzania to review its constitution and relevant electoral laws so as to have an independent electoral commission and achieve other related political rights. We also respectively call on the Commission to press the government of Tanzania to open civic and political space, including to allow public political meetings and rallies to freely take place. We respectively call on the Commission to advise the government of Tanzania to strictly observe and take heed to democratic and good governance principles as provided for by the Constitution of Tanzania and Zanzibar, regional and international instruments. We urge the Commission to recommend to the government of Tanzania to increase gender equality and participation of women in decision-making to attain 50-50 agenda. We acknowledge the government of Tanzania for enacting the Legal Aid Act of 2017, but we call upon the Commission again to recommend to the government of Tanzania to enact the same law, the Legal Aid Act, in Zanzibar, and to fully support the initiative by providing legal aid government funding as a way of implementing Sustainable Development Goal number 16. We again call upon the Commission to argue the government of Tanzania to respect girls' right to education by allowing teen mothers to resume their studies in public schools. And last, we respectively call upon the Commission to urge the government of Tanzania to abolish death penalty and remove restrictions on the right to bail. I humbly submit. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, Honorable Commissioners, Article 19 appreciates this opportunity to address the Commission and the session at large on the growing tide of impunity on freedom of expression violations in the Eastern Africa region. We stand together with all those who are here to assert the need for an independent commission. A more diverse observer constituency is a more inclusive and representative one. Our monitoring has shown that in Uganda, most of the 71 violations on freedom of expression violations from May 2017 to now, ranging from 44 counts of threats to journalists and 26 FM stations being shut down, have not been resolved. We are first to note that security officers and government officials are the main perpetrators of these threats and attacks. In Tanzania, the legislative suffocation of freedom of expression and truth continues to create an environment of self-censorship, which further fuels impunity on freedom of expression violations. Most recently, the government has put in place amendments to the Statistics Act 2015, which now criminalizes the dissemination or communication of any statistics intended to distort or invalidate official statistics. Again, none of the 19 reported violations so far for this year has been resolved. These include, amongst others, 4 media shutdowns, 3 incidences of police harassment, and 2 human rights defenders being threatened for their work. In Kenya, most discouragingly, the April 2015 killing of Eldoret-based journalist John Kitui and 1 photojournalist in the same year remain unresolved, and most of the 94 incidences of freedom of expression violations between May 2017 to April 2018 have not been investigated. While the Office of the Inspector General has indicated motions to set up a special desk to follow up on violations against journalists, more action is needed in investigating already reported cases. Despite the reforming political environment in Ethiopia, little remains to be said about the reform and overhaul of legislations like the Anti-Terrorism Proclamation and Media and Access to Information Proclamations that have in the past been used to incarcerate expressors.
Excellency, Madam Chair, Honorable Commissioners, and all protocol observed. I work for HelpAge International, and it's a global network working with and for older persons. We are glad that this ordinary session is being held just after the African Human Rights Day celebration, and as the continent joins the rest of the world to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Although there is much to celebrate, there is much more work to do to protect the rights of older people. HelpAge notes the increasing efforts by African Union, UNECA, African member states, the national human rights institutions, civil societies like Africa Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, Center for Human Rights, Pretoria University, in advancing the rights of older people in the continent. Specifically, we note the efforts towards improving legal, policy, and programmatic actions on the rights of older people at national level, and the participation in the ongoing open-ended working group on aging made by member states and national human rights institutions of South Africa, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Morocco, Egypt, Comoros, Lesotho, Mauritius, Malawi, Rwanda, Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, and Senegal, among others. Despite this, older persons' rights remains invisible in human rights law, national legislation, and our day-to-day lives. The African legal instrument for older persons, the African Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Older People in Africa, was adopted by our head of states in January 2016. To date, apart from the report we got from Lesotho today, none of our member states have ratified it. And we really congratulate Lesotho for that, and we hope the rest of our countries would follow suit. Additionally, disappointingly, few African governments and human rights stakeholders are participating in the ongoing discussions on a new convention on the rights of older people. The adoption and ratification of a UN convention and the protocol would support in making the policy, legal, and programmatic frameworks that would ensure our older people across Africa enjoy their rights on an equal basis with others. Older people continue to face ageism, discrimination, abuse, neglect, violence, and denial of their rights in both humanitarian and development context. They are killed as a result of witchcraft accusation. Older women, in particular, are subjected to intersecting and cumulative forms of discrimination because they are women, but because they are also older. We would like to call on the Commission, the national human rights institutions, the UN system, the NGOs, and development partners to join hands with us to support our member states to accelerate the ratification and implementation of the protocol. 2, to engage the current discussion on a new convention on the rights of older people, and to impress our member states to participate in the ongoing process. 3, to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2063, national planning and budgeting, data management processes are age inclusive. 4, we would like us to join hands to empower older people to understand their rights and entitlements so that we can facilitate their participation in decision making. We hope to work with all of you to advance the rights of older persons that need special and urgent attention. Thank you for this opportunity to address you.
Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Commissioners, my esteemed colleagues, it is my pleasure to present this statement on behalf of the Legal Resources Centre of South Africa and the International Network of Civil Liberties Organisations, INCLO. Article 11 of the African Charter gives us all the right to come together and literally stand for what we believe in. This is a fundamental aspect of democratic participation. Government's role as the primary duty bearers regarding human rights is to facilitate peaceful assemblies. Defending dissent towards state practices that protect and promote the right to protest is a report produced by INCLO member organizations. This report crystallizes international best practice in policing protest into a set of practical principles which states can implement to help create an environment conducive to democratic and peaceful protest. It is our hope that all present today will be able to use this document as a guide on how to manage assemblies in a manner that protects all stakeholders' rights. I would also like to invite you to the launch of this report, which will be happening tonight at 6 o'clock in room 6. Thank you. I'm not done, sorry. States engage in surveillance of people within their borders in order to preempt threats to security and stability in their nations. This is only legitimate when done in a strict framework of independent authorization and must be both necessary and proportionate. In today's global world, states share sensitive intelligence products among themselves, ostensibly in order to counter transnational threats. However, little information is available about the rules which govern these exchanges. Unanswered Questions, International Intelligence Sharing is an INCLO report which seeks to shine light on this secret world. This issue affects us all, from majority party politicians to human rights defenders who are especially vulnerable to this practice. INCLO and the LRC urge all stakeholders to use unanswered questions as a means to push for us to at least be told the rules governing a potentially perilous practice. Flowing from African Commission Resolution 350 and 362, a process led by Deputy Chairperson of the ACHPR is underway to revise the crucial normative standard-setting document. The LRC commends the Commission for undertaking this important and necessary reformulation of this document to reflect the principles which ought to inform free expression in the 21st century, and sincerely hopes it will continue in its progressive stance towards the expansion of the Declaration regarding online expression, particularly regarding the enabling role of privacy online. Holding states that abuse the power vested in them accountable for failing their people is a noble, truly valuable, but often thankless task. The disturbing trend of shrinking space for legitimate civil engagement is often championed by states which commit the most egregious human rights violations. This makes our fight to keep institutions like the African Commission on Human and People's Rights alive all the more important. The decision of the AU Executive Council is a patently willful disregard of the clear text of the African Charter. We cannot sit idly by while certain African states work tirelessly to shut down fora where their putrid disregard for the well-being of their own citizens can be brought to light for all the world to see. Commissioners, you have an ally in the Legal Resources Center. We support the campaign to ensure that the ACHPR remains an effective safeguard for the right of Africa's people. We commit to seeking out the states which share our esteem for your work and galvanize them against the influence of the rogues who would have Africa's people continue to live a life devoid of dignity and the very basics which were accepted as far back as June 1981. We hope that the ACHPR will always remain independent. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. The Initiative for Social and Economic Rights is a non-government organization based in Uganda which seeks to promote the effective understanding, monitoring, implementation, and full realization of economic social rights. Our statement today addresses the increased involvement of private actors in social service delivery, like health and education, and the need to regulate them to ensure the realization of economic social rights. ISA welcomes the African Commission on Human Rights' heightened attention to economic, social, and cultural rights. However, inadequate regulatory frameworks for private actors in service delivery continues to hinder the realization of economic social rights, particularly for vulnerable groups, women, children, persons with disabilities, and indigenous minorities. Government's increasing reliance on these non-state actors to provide social services, coupled with declining state investment in social services, continues to threaten economic social rights. In Uganda, the public health sector is underfunded with a budget that has hovered between 7 to 9% over the last 5 years, detrimentally affecting the quality of public health care and resulting in a vacuum. As a result, communities are increasingly resorting to private health facilities. We've seen 49% of health facilities private. Rather than constructing public health facilities in hard-to-reach areas, the government has resorted to facilitating private actors to deliver health services. Yet governments are yet to put in place adequate regulatory, supervisory, and monitoring frameworks for the bargaining private sector involvement in health, education, and water. The inadequate regulation of the private sector has resulted in discrimination. For example, in Uganda, ISA's research found that weak governance framework for health has resulted in private actors charging exorbitant fees, holding patients that can't pay hostage, and ultimately resulting in discrimination in access to services, particularly for vulnerable groups. As a result of the privatization of these services, we are seeing states increasingly release themselves from the obligation to fulfill economic, social, and cultural rights. It's imperative that the African Commission provides interpretative guidance to states on regulating private actors in the delivery of social services. While we commend a working group on extractives, private actors' involvement in social services like health and education is beyond the scope of and has not been tackled by this working group. The UN, on the other hand, has issued a general comment on economic, social, and cultural rights in the context of business activities. The African Commission should provide interpretative guidance to states, including guidelines related to the role and limitation of private actors in the delivery of social services. For instance, the development of a general comment on the issue and model monitoring and assessment guidelines. ISA is also concerned about the curtailing of the mandate of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and Decision 1015. We recognize that an independent African Commission is necessary to safeguard rights on this continent and call upon the African Union to remember that the African Commission on Human and People's Rights shall always be independent. Thank you. Your Excellencies, Honorable Commissioners of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, the Dula Omar Institute, formerly Community Law Center at the University of Western Cape, wishes to express some concerns about the state of access to justice for vulnerable and marginalized groups in the region. A great number of African population live below the poverty line, and this has had a direct impact on their access to justice. The cost of securing legal representation and filing of court papers can be prohibitive for many Africans, particularly disadvantaged groups. As a result, many people in the region are unable to or reluctant to seek justice to remedy any wrong. In many African countries, the justice system is inadvertently designed to create barriers to disadvantaged groups or populations, particularly people seeking justice for breached rights. Given the pervasive levels of poverty in the region, high costs of securing legal representation, we see many people are discouraged from using the formal justice system. The situation can particularly be very dicey for vulnerable and marginalized groups, including people living in rural areas. We've noted that most formal courts are located in urban areas, posing a challenge of distance and added transportation costs to impoverished and marginalized citizens. In many African countries, legal systems inherited from colonial systems are antiquated. Cumbersome parliamentary processes have led to slow pace of reform of these systems. Procedures in court are sometimes intimidating and may discourage vulnerable and marginalized groups from seeking justice. The language disparity in African indigenous languages of rural and marginalized groups vis-à-vis the formal language of the courts continues to constitute a further barrier to accessing justice. We've seen situations where court procedures are conducted in a language that a disadvantaged litigant may not understand, making it inaccessible to a significant number of people. Considering the pervasive level of poverty in Africa, legal aid systems have often come in as a necessary remedy. In South Africa, for instance, the Legal Aid Act of 1969 heralded the provision of legal aid services to indigent citizens who were criminally accused. However, despite this, many national legal aid systems are overburdened. And as other forms of legal aid systems have emerged alongside the national ones, we've continued to see serious challenges there. Some have cited the use of informal traditional systems as a redress and possibly a replacement for the barriers within the formal justice system to accessing justice. And while it's an appealing alternative to accessing justice, especially for rural and marginalized groups in Africa, because of the reconciliatory nature of the system, which takes into account inclusive and public participatory system, the traditional justice system, however, still remains a beacon of hope for many disadvantaged people. Honorable members of the Commission, a discussion on access to justice in Africa is not complete without mentioning the pivotal role of paralegals, who have helped remove obstacles in access to justice for vulnerable and marginalized groups. But despite their very important role, they encounter challenges in many African countries, including lack of funding, lack of recognition under the law, and lack of capacity. We wish to remind everyone that ensuring access to justice is a human rights issue. In September 2015, the international community, in adopting the Sustainable Development Goals, agreed that access to justice for all, especially vulnerable and marginalized groups, by 2030 was a priority. Indicator 16.3 aims at promoting the rule of law at national and international levels. At the African level, in Agenda 2063, one of our aspirations is an Africa where good governance, respect for human rights, justice, and rule of law is the norm. And this commission, we noted, has developed norms and standards, including resolution on the right to recourse and fair trial in Africa, resolution on the right to fair trial and legal assistance in Africa, and principles and guidelines on the right to fair trial and legal assistance in Africa, including others like the Kampala Declaration on Prison Conditions in Africa and Plan of Action, and the Lilongwe Declaration on Accessing Legal Aid in the Criminal Justice System in Africa. These various norms and standards impose obligations on African governments to ensure that vulnerable and marginalized groups are able to access justice. In light of the above, the Dula Omar Institute recommends that the Commission remind African governments of their obligations under the African Charter, particularly instruments on ensuring access to justice on all. We call on African governments to remove barriers to access to justice or disadvantaged groups in Africa. The Commission should call on African governments to live up to their commitment under Sustainable Development Goal 16.3 and invest in programs that will deliver easy, cheap, and accessible justice systems to all. And finally, to consider the adoption of a resolution calling for the formal recognition of the work of community paralegals in ensuring access to justice for vulnerable and marginalized groups across the continent. We thank you.